Hey there, Laker fans. Hope everybody had a nice, eventful, well, it was definitely eventful Thursday for the first day of NBA free agency. Uh, Welcome to another episode of Radio KBE. I just wanted to record just like a quick recap. Hopefully, it'll be quick. A quick recap of just sort of how the day went today and the people that we signed, and just some of the news that we've been hearing as things have been sort of going on with what rumors and stuff like that have been happening. So what I've got on the screen here, as you guys can see, is I've got the four guys that we signed today during free agency. So we signed Troy Brown, we signed Juan Toscano Anderson, we signed Damian Jones, and we signed Lonnie Walker. Three of those guys, everybody except Lonnie Walker, was a veteran minimum signing. And Lonnie Walker ended up taking the MLE because we ended up losing Malik Monk to the Sacramento Kings, who ended up signing there. So there's been a lot of people grumbling and stuff like that about the signings and stuff, like not being as impactful as you'd expect it. And I know that there's been a lot of grumbling about Lonnie Walker too. Juan and Lonnie are both clutch. And if you remember in the last video, that if you watched it, I told you guys that Juan Toscano is probably a lock to come to the Lakers just because he is clutch. He is basically the type of athlete that we need. Good chance that the Warriors probably aren't going to keep him, so he's very close to being a lock. And I'm actually not surprised that Lonnie Walker. Well, the part that surprises me is he was restricted because he was given a qualifying offer yesterday, and then it was rescinded, and then very quickly he ended up signing with the Lakers. So chances are probably what happened is Lonnie went to the Spurs and said, he doesn't want to take the qualifying offer or whatever, and the Spurs, he may have just worked something out with the Spurs, and so they rescinded his qualifying offer. And so now he's with the Lakers. He took the MLE. So I know there's been a lot of grumbling about these players specifically, how much of an impact they're actually going to make. And I know specifically with Lonnie, the conversation's been, oh, he's just a 6'4", 6'5" guy. He has a huge wingspan, 6'10". But, what does that actually do for us? So the first thing I just want to say is this. Many of these guys are situational role players. And these are guys that gravitate within Ham's system. They gravitate within, they have specific purpose, they have specific ability. They're not specialists in the same way. The one thing that probably all four of these players are is they're young. So the Lakers got young by adding all four of these guys. Secondly, they're all athletes. And that is something that we actually needed badly on this team. It was so bad that it got to a point where we were adding Wenyen Gabriel and Stanley Johnson, and all of a sudden we were a better defense, or there was more hustle and there was better rebounding, all that sort of stuff. So the need for athletes and to get younger was huge for the Lakers. And I think a lot of people, not a lot of people, but I think fans, because we always get so excited for free agency, we sort of lose the sight of the forest for the trees. Like, it's still free agency. You still have to have cap mechanisms to be able to get players. And so the Lakers don't have cap mechanisms. The only thing that they have is the taxpayer mid-level exception. So really the only way we were going to get guys that are true impact guys, the premier shooters and stuff like that, is going to be by trade. It's going to have to be Talen Horton-Tucker or Kendrick Nunn or obviously Russell Westbrook, the person who's been mentioned as the biggest trade candidate and stuff like that for the Lakers. That's the way it's going to happen. We're not going to do it because we don't have cap space, so we don't have the ability to afford, that sort of stuff. That being said, grabbing these players on, especially Troy Brown, Toscano Anderson, Damian Jones, like just grabbing young athletic players who will get minutes and get an opportunity to, hustle, grab rebounds, get up and down the floor, play defense, just do dirty work. Just do small things that we need them to do so that we're not taxing Anthony Davis, so that we're not taxing LeBron and whoever else is on the team. Like that goes a long way. And one of the reasons why I like all four of these signings is because of something that I read earlier today. And it's that Darvin Ham is actually in the process with Rob Pelinka kind of approving all of these signings and stuff like that. Like he's not, this is not something that's independent from what the coach is doing. That's a big deal to me because I personally have a low confidence I have a low level of confidence in Rob's ability to see basketball value in players. Um, and I would say there are probably other people around the league, and there are fans who don't like him at all, don't think he has basketball acumen. He obviously is an agent, he understands cap stuff, but you want your coach to be part of that process. And one of the best things that give me a lot of enthusiasm and optimism about Darvin Ham is he was a role player, so he understands what small things role players have to do in order for them to be successful in the league, on a team, for a successful strategy, whatever it is. And so when we grab able bodies, athletic bodies that have size, that have wingspan. Lonnie Walker 6'5". I believe Troy Brown is 6'6". Juan Toscano Anderson might be 6'6". Troy Brown actually maybe a little bit taller. Damian Jones, obviously young 7-footer. Like, these are all guys that can move around in space and do those small things that we need to do. So I'm actually very happy with all the veteran minimum signings that we had. I did not expect us to get impact guys because we don't have cap space. So we're not in a competitive position to sign certain guys. The other thing is also this. I know there's been grumbling about Lonnie Walker and his inability to shoot and stuff like that. I think there is an expectation with the Lakers front office that Darvin Ham's system, the simplifying the offense and stuff like that, and then also Chris Gent, the person that we had as his assistant head coach, who's been given a lot of credit for being a good shooting coach or helping a team become a very good shooting team. I think they're expecting whatever they do, whatever they're good at, to help a team become a better jump shooting team. I think that's what they're banking on. They're banking on Gent, Coach Gent, being able to get higher quality. If Ham's offense is able to get higher quality shots, he could put the right people in the right position. That still remains to be seen. We don't know, but it's just good to sort of see that sort of thing. I like the idea of getting athletes who may be a little raw in their ability, but because they're athletes, they can physically keep up with the pace of this game. And nowadays, the speed of the game is so fast, both on offense and defense, and you need athletes. Like, you can't get away with guys constantly taking, just not running back on defense. Because if 5-on-4, 2 or 3 times in a row, teams are getting smarter and smarter at finding the open three. That you can bury yourself in that process. So when you have athletes, you have guys who can crash the glass on the offense and crash the glass on the defensive end. In the last video I talked about, if we get a 3-and-D guy, it's not just about their defense. It's not just about their three-point shooting. Like, we don't need, you're not going to find all 40% three-point shooters or all super elite defensive players. Like, you're going to have to find some balance. And for the Lakers, they just need guys that can make threes at league average. They don't have to be 40% three-point shooters. If they are, great, but they really don't have to be. And that makes a massive difference because the Lakers were a terrible jump shooting team last season. So it's good that we grabbed guys that could at least, to some degree, maybe if playing in Gent and, with Coach Gent and playing in Darvin Ham's offense, it'll give them a little bit of a bump in terms of just kind of their ability and stuff like that. So I'm not really surprised. I'm actually happy that a lot of the players that we sort of scouted out, that we've talked about. If you follow me on the timeline, just people I've tried to scout out, be like, hey, this is a good player to add. This is a good player to add. 3 to 4 of these names were already here. Damian Jones was a name that we mentioned when we talked about a mobile 5 versus a big 5, like a heavy floor spacing 5. So now that we have our mobile 5, and then we also have Anthony Davis on the roster, there's probably a good chance that if the Lakers do target another big, it's going to be one that's more heavy, not slim in the frame, the way Damian Jones is. It'll be somebody who's not as mobile, but may be able to shoot the ball. So you're thinking of a guy like DeMarcus Cousins or a guy like Thomas Bryant, who's been also, he's pretty mobile himself, but a more rugged defender because of how stout he is physically. That might be a player that gets targeted by the Lakers too as well. So it'll be interesting to see how the veteran market the free agent market shakes out. Not that many teams use their mid-level exceptions, but there's still a lot of players that are out there that may still be getting targeted in that manner. So it'll be interesting to see. So when it comes to these 4 specific players, I like them all. I'm high on Ham's offense and what Coach Gent brings player development-wise. I'm on board with them finding a successful process and getting something good out of these players. I'm not surprised at all to any degree that Lonnie Walker was the one who got the MLE for the from the Lakers. Uh, like I mentioned before, every single year, we end up signing clutch clients, especially guys that need to build up their value. Lonnie Walker falls right into that. His value tanked completely because the Spurs were not a serious team for like 3/4 of the year, and then they got serious towards the end of the year and tried to make a run to get into the play-in and all that sort of stuff. Is all kind of fake. It wasn't like a real intentional way of trying to get into it, but like I think a lot of the players on that team sort of suffered to some degree, because there was no, probably real development. Like DeJounte Murray got traded. They traded for Danilo Gallinari and they waived him, and so now and then they pulled the qualifying offer on Lonnie Walker, and then they've got clearly they're trying to tank and stuff like that. So it's just a lot of the times we think to ourselves, well, how come this player even in a losing situation couldn't put up a ton of stats? Sometimes it's just a matter of the situation not being right, inconsistent minutes, inconsistent objectives and goals throughout the season. But, just like Malik Monk, just like Alex Caruso, if you can find a consistent role and you can put a player in a position to be successful, whether it's using their athleticism, whether it's, turning them into a shooting specialist, whatever it is, if you can find a way to put them in situations to be successful, then they can flourish. And Malik Monk is a perfect example of that. He was a guy who basically got let go from Charlotte, more or less took a six-man role with the Lakers and flourished. And our team, we couldn't shoot anything. Like nobody could score. Especially when Anthony Davis and LeBron were out, and everybody's getting mad at Russ. Like Malik was able to score in different ways, and the Lakers desperately needed that. But now we have a completely different system. We have Ham's offensive philosophy, which will probably require a guy like Lonnie Walker, who's an athlete who can maybe get to the rim using dribble handoffs or pick and roll or just running in transition. You want guys to get up and down the court. If that's the style of basketball we're going to play, these guys are all great signings for that specific purpose. So I like that. Lakers got younger, more athletic. And when I look at guys like, the ones that we want to target, Mo Bamba, the guy Isaiah Hartenstein, a few players that just, Gary Harris, like players that we probably were hoping that we could land at the taxpayer MLE. None of them land. None of them. Like they're all going for 8 million, 9 million, 10 million. So like being upset about these signings really doesn't mean anything. Like because you didn't have any way of getting those players to begin with. So they, we hope that Lonnie works out. I do trust Ham's evaluation process when it comes to making a decision like this to go after a guy like Lonnie. So I like the signings. No problem there. However, the one thing that that this sort of the Lonnie Walker signing sort of brings up is that we now have too many players that are in the same boat. So even though we lost Malik Monk, we signed Lonnie Walker, which means now we have Lonnie Walker, Taylor Horton-Tucker, Kendrick Nunn, and Russell Westbrook, and Austin Reeves. 5 guys that you are probably going to play in those positions, the 1 or the 2 spot, whether you play 2 combo guards or whether you play traditional point guard. And the Lakers still have some open spots left. And so I'm not of the mind. I don't. There are no shooting specialists in that group. Nobody that's in that group is a knockdown shooter. Maybe you could say Kendrick Nunn is, but none of those guys are knockdown shooters, and that's a problem. And because none of those guys are knockdown shooters, the other issue is also you're going to have 4 or 5 guys that are all competing for minutes. Russ is going to play, if he's on this roster, Russ is going to play his 30 minutes and stuff like that. But the problem is that you have Nunn, Talon, Lonnie, and Austin Reeves. Those are 4 guys that are going to, they need minutes so they can get to their next contract. Talon has a player option for the following year that he may opt in or opt out for about $10 million. Kendrick Nunn is expiring. Lonnie Walker might have a player option, I think, on the second year. And Austin Reeves, he's an unguaranteed contract. Like I'm sure he's going to try to, these guys need minutes to build their value. And I don't know how you're going to be able to fit all of their minutes and touches, their opportunities, especially with Russ on this team. I don't know where those opportunities, shooting opportunities and stuff like that come from. And so that's going to be interesting. And so I am of the mind that with this Lonnie Walker signing, it's probably leaning more towards Talon, Nunn, Russ, and or Russ being moved. So right now we've seen that, and this is a nice transition. Right now we've seen that the Lakers are waiting on Kyrie Irving, and they're waiting to see just kind of what ends up happening with them. It sounds like Kyrie has no market, and I mean, frankly, to be honest, he has no market. Like if he's the leverage that Kyrie has over every team that could potentially want to trade him as an expiring, is that he can literally tell them, "I'm not going to extend with you." So the only value Kyrie has to that team is that he's an expiring contract, and that maybe you get his full effort on the team for that final year. Like he may just, because if you think about it, he's an expiring contract, he wants to get an extension next year. He's not going to jeopardize his health. He's not going to play through injury, stuff like that. So for all intents and purposes, like his market isn't that great. So which team is willing to take the risk on trading for him, knowing that, and he's willing to extend with them? From what it sounds like, it's only the Lakers. So it seems like they're holding out Russ. They're holding on to Russ to either flip him to the Nets, which I don't think is going to be the case, or they'll flip him to a third team. And the reason why this becomes more possible is because the Nets are not trying to bottom out. The Nets have all their picks from the Harden trade. They not all their picks, but a decent amount of picks. They've sent those picks to Houston and pick swaps, and so they don't want a situation where they bottom out and then Houston basically, their pick swaps end up being valuable to Houston, and then Houston doesn't have to worry about losing games to that sort of thing. So the Nets want to continue to be competitive. So that means that if the Lakers are going to move Russ, and the guy that's eventually going to make his way to the Lakers is going to end up being Kyrie, then Russ becomes a more valuable expiring. So if there's a team out there that values Kyrie just as an expiring, well, they may also value Russ just as an expiring too as well. And because Russ is a larger contract, there may be a team out there that's willing, that the Nets want to work with, that they're okay with bringing salaries back because they want to remain competitive. So you think of teams like Charlotte with Terry Rozier, Gordon Hayward. The Nets may feel, and obviously the Kevin Durant situation, the trade request is what's looming. That's the whole backdrop to all this sort of situation. I don't know if KD is going to land, it's been speculated that Kyrie, Lakers should trade Russ and AD to get Kyrie and KD because they both want to play together, but they just don't want to play for the Nets. The relationship's just gone with the organization. So I don't know what's going to happen with their situation, stuff like that. But going back to just the Russ for Kyrie thing, Russ can go to a third team that really wants an expiring. A team like Charlotte, or even a team like Indiana. Like Indiana really wants to get rid of Malcolm Brogdon, and Indiana really wants to get rid of Buddy Hield. Maybe the Nets are okay with taking on Malcolm Brogdon and Buddy Hield, and they run a lineup of Brogdon, Hield, Ben Simmons, and then whoever they get in return for KD. And, that's still a competitive roster. That's still a pretty good roster for them to be successful, and, not worry about losing picks and stuff like that. So that sort of thing is just kind of the way that trade would sort of work out. I don't know if it's going to happen. It seems like it's going to happen just because there's just too much smoke around it, but who knows? In the NBA, everything can change. But if the Lakers do trade Russ for Kyrie Irving, a lot of people are like, oh, yeah, well, now we have shooting and stuff like that, so it's a great fit. But see, now the problem is that Kyrie's still a small guard. And so even though he's a great shooter, now you have Kyrie, Talon, Nunn, and Lonnie Walker. You still have too many small guards. And Kyrie's obviously going to shoot the ball significantly. Like, he's going to shoot the ball around. He's being literally brought on just to score. So now the question becomes, even if you add Kyrie, like, chances are one of Talon or Nunn, or maybe a combination of them both, they're probably going to get moved for shooters. Like, they're going to get, the Lakers are going to have to move them for wings, for guys that are 6'6", 6'7", a little bit bigger. Because, I don't think Troy Brown and Juan Toscano Anderson are going to be, like, big 30-minute guys and stuff like that. Like, they'll probably play, like, 20 minutes depending on what the matchup is and what time of the year and stuff like that is. But it seems like these signings from today, which are great signings, good athletes, good young players. These are the guys that you're going to see that are towards a little bit more towards the ninth, 10th, maybe even like the ninth, 10th, 11th, 12th players in our rotation. And we will be going like 10, 11, 12 players deep in the regular season. Coach Ham keeps a very, Mike Budenholzer keeps a very strict 32-minute requirement for his stars over in Milwaukee. I expect Coach Ham to do exactly the same thing. So whether it's Russ, LeBron, and AD, or if it's Kyrie, LeBron, and AD, if that trade ends up going through, they're going to play on a very strict minutes restriction, which means that there are going to be minutes available for other players. And so obviously we need more shooters on this team. We need more shooting on this team. And I think that's sort of the direction that the Lakers are going to go in. But overall, for the first day, it's just been a good day. I think these are good signings. We need to get younger. We need to get more athletic. We are not as skilled as we'd like to be as a team with these signings, but that stuff is going to come. Like, it's not those getting those skill position players. A, they're expensive, and B, it's just, and you have to have cap space to get them. And B, it's you're going to have to get them via trade. You're not going to get them, at a veteran minimum, or else everybody would be fighting to get those players, and they would be signed immediately. The other thing, and one last thing I'll say is a couple of players have just kind of become available as of like today, as of I think earlier today and stuff like that. Like Danilo, like I mentioned, Gallinari got bought out by the Spurs. I think he's being linked to like Boston or Miami or something like that. But now that everybody signed sort of their max extensions because they're now getting released and stuff like that, and because we're seeing like all these smaller signings happen, I think now day two, obviously I think everybody's waiting on the Kevin Durant trade because that'll shake things out and stuff like that. But it'll be interesting to see just kind of what direction everybody goes in. But I think this is where you're going to start seeing teams kind of move players around. Once all the big names sort of they ink their extensions, which everybody has. Like every player has basically signed an extension with their incumbent team. Then we'll start seeing guys move around and stuff like that. So day two should be a little bit more active, I would say, maybe on the trade market and on the free agent market once things get settled. But teams may be in a little bit of a holding pattern because they want to see what happens, which team Kevin Durant ends up going to, because he's a superstar tier player. So he's, that kind of stuff matters. And, who knows what direction, he could go. He could stay in the East or he could go to the West. We don't know what ends up happening with him. But overall, I thought it was a really great day. And I wouldn't get too caught up in headshot. Oh, what are those things that people keep sharing? The scatter plots with the little headshots of every player that has like one rank really low, and it says, okay, if this player's on the bottom left, this means this guy's a terrible player. Like, I wouldn't use that to evaluate players because I know a lot of fans like to use analytics and they like the visual aids that allow them to figure out, whether a player is good or not. But you've seen it with a guy like Alex Caruso. You've seen it with a guy like Malik Monk. Malik Monk was considered a very low IQ player. He had skill, but he was considered very low IQ, not a good defender. Doesn't mean that he was a great defender for the Lakers, but you can see that when he was put in a situation where he could do what he was best at, he was very good. Same thing with Alex Caruso. Like, he was put in a position where he could focus on the things that he's good at, and he ended up being successful for the Lakers. So I'd just caution using that sort of stuff. One rule of thumb I've always used is that data and analytics is helpful to quantify what you see with your eyes. You should always watch first and then see if the data matches what you're watching. But at the same time, data is a historical record of how things have gone for that player. It's not an indicator of what future success could look like. Doesn't mean you don't pay attention to data. And I'm specifically saying this in regards to Lonnie Walker. Like, I would trust the evaluation of my coach and Joey and Jesse Buss because these guys are good at spotting talent like this. I would trust them to do that because they've been successful in that regards. And I wouldn't get so caught up in, well, this chart says that he was not good here and he played for the Spurs, so what happened? Like situations matter a lot, and probably no example than Andrew Wiggins going from the Minnesota Timberwolves to the Golden State Warriors. He was miscast as a number one, or even as a number two, and it turned out that he's probably better as a three because of his skills and just kind of how he plays and stuff like that. So you never know how some of these guys can work out, but I do trust our coach to figure out how to put them in good situations. So overall, I think it was a good day one. Nothing too crazy or too splashy, but at least now we know it's going to either be via trade or it's going to be more veteran minimum signings. And they are going to have to make a trade. They have too many guys that do sort of the same thing on the roster. So I'll be interested to see like just kind of how things work out for the team and stuff like that. And as always, I appreciate you guys taking the time and watching these videos. If you can subscribe, it would be awesome. You guys have been wonderful. If you like the videos and you hit the like button, it does help on the algorithm, so I appreciate it. We're almost at 400 subscribers in less than a month and a half, which is awesome. So my goal is to get to 1,000 before next season starts, and then we can do live chats and stuff like that, fun stuff. And I've got a lot of ideas for things that we can do during the regular season, post games and stuff like that. So I appreciate everybody watching, and if nothing else, I hope you guys have a wonderful evening, and I'll see you in the next video.